All right, man, peace. So I mentioned in another video how common it is today for many of the players, particularly many of the point guards, to have an issue in understanding how to feed the post, because it's so rare today that many of the front court players even post up at all. And you see it all over the NBA. A power forward or a center will call for the basketball in the low post, and the point guard or the shooting guard will wave them out or wave them off, because low post scoring just is not as accentuated today as it was back in the 80s, 90s, and prior. Well, I noticed it on full display in Game 1 between the Houston Rockets and the Minnesota Timberwolves. Karl Towns, who I did a video on a couple of weeks ago, many times he tried to post up, and Jeff Teague either waved him off or threw him a terrible pass in the low post, and it contributed to Karl Towns having a very poor game. Now, Towns, he has a couple of problems. Number one, his coach. Thibodeau is not going to be the coach that's going to help him excel, because to me, Thibodeau is a blown-up assistant coach masquerading as a head coach. Number two, Jimmy Butler is a semi-alpha male player on his team. Why do I call him a semi-alpha male player? Because he has an alpha male persona and mentality, but he's not quite talented enough to lead a team to a championship. In order for the Minnesota Timberwolves to truly go as far as they need to go, Karl Towns has to be their number one player. And then, of course, you have the issue with Andrew Wiggins. But again, in order for the Minnesota Timberwolves to be as good as they need to be, Karl Towns has to average at least 20 shots per game in the playoffs. That's the only way that they're going to have a chance to win games. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Game 2 of Wolves-Rockets series. This tips off later tonight. And all eyes on Karl Towns. Only scored 8 points on 9 shot attempts in that very winnable Game 1. And
look, nothing against Jamal Crawford. He's a nice player. He pretty much is an and one mixtape player in the NBA. But when Karl Towns is in the low post, give him the ball. I don't need to see you go in between the legs 3 times and then pull up for an 18-footer. That's a very low percentage shot.
And remember, Tibbs said after that, Cat had to be...
Jeff Teague is a terrible passer. Terrible.
...more active. So, Tracy, who is responsible for...
Before Tracy McGrady answers, of course, Karl Towns is the most responsible for why he's not getting the amount of shots that he should get. And it's because of his personality. He's a little bit too laid back, and he allows other less talented players to gain more prominent positions because they're probably more aggressive than him. He's going to have to stand up to quite a few entities in that franchise, starting with the coach. He allows Thibodeau to talk to him any type of way, and you can't have that, because at the end of the day, Towns is going to be there far longer than Thibodeau is going to be there. And if he screams on Thibodeau, I would dare Thibodeau to sit him down. I would dare him to bench Karl Towns. I guarantee you he won't do it. And why do I say he may need to scream on Thibodeau? Not necessarily during the game, but maybe after practice or something like that, because I find that Thibodeau's language and the way that he expresses himself towards Towns, it goes a little bit too far for a coach who's never won shit. Like, simmer down, dude. He's using all type of F-bombs and shitheads and idiots and all those type of terms towards Karl Towns, I notice. And again, you've never won shit. It's not like you're Greg Popovich. Like, fall back and calm down. And I think that he thinks that he's making Karl Towns tougher. I don't think that Towns is the guy that you need to do that with. I do think that Towns is going to have to grow into his role as the leader of that team in order for them to go as far as they need to go.
For Cat getting the ball more tonight.
Cat and his point guard. I mean, it's just that simple. If I'm going to set a pick and roll for my point guard, and they're going to switch and have a small on me, it is up to me to get down to the post and post him up. You're letting James Harden off the hook. There was so many times that James Harden switched on Karl Towns.
Of course, because it's just stupid basketball. And a lot of people just don't understand the difference in smart teams and stupid teams, and how really that is the differentiation between who advances in the playoffs. Who's going to take advantage of their matchups? That's it. Now look at the New Orleans Pelicans. I guarantee you, when Anthony Davis gets a switch, he's getting the ball from Rondo or Drew Holiday. When Karl Towns gets a switch and you have James Harden guarding him, why would you not throw him the ball? You want James Harden to have to defend, number one. Number two, you want him to get into foul trouble. That's what you think they would be thinking. So I blame the guards, and I also blame Thibodeau, because he's supposed to chastise the hell out of his guards during timeouts, at the end of quarters, or at the half, if they're not taking advantage of those switches.
And he just went to the 3-point line. Like what are you doing? You have to kill him down there. That should be barbecue chicken, like Shaq said. Like, you have to punish these guys. You're a 7 foot. You are a beast down there. He's got to play more aggressive and demand the ball. If T talking about clear out, no, you better clear out and give me.
Absolutely, you tell him, Tracy. That's how a bona fide scorer thinks. No, you better clear out, or you know what, you better clear out, or clear out your damn locker.
Well, give me the ball.
You know what, you're absolutely right. At first, I wanted to say whose responsibility. I wanted to say Tibbs, maybe Teague, or even the leader.
Jimmy Butler.
Huh?
You talking about Jimmy Butler?
Jimmy Butler.
Exactly. You can't even remember his name. Nothing against Jimmy Butler, but he's a lower level second tier, really probably an upper level third tier player in the NBA. Nothing against him. Great two-way player. That's why I would say maybe he's lower level second tier. But Karl Anthony Towns has the potential to be an upper level second tier player. He just has to grab it. And he's going to have to put those other guys on his team in their place. The problem is that right now the NBA is so three-point and jump shot centric that a player like him, with the multitude of skills that he has, is not as valued as he should be. He should be viewed in the same way on his team as Joel Embiid is on the Philadelphia 76ers. Karl Anthony Towns should be averaging somewhere in the 24 to 25 point per game range. He has to be their lead guy in order for them to have a chance to win, and they have to know what their identity is. They should not be a team that is trying to shoot threes with the Golden State Warriors or the Houston Rockets. Play like the New Orleans Pelicans. Run your offense through your big man, but in order to do that, they need guards with a higher basketball IQ, which also means that they may need a coach with a higher offensive basketball IQ. People forget Thibodeau is a defensive coach, and it shows.
And so, but it's all on Cat. You have to be more demanding.
Sure.
It's the playoffs. Like,
I'm seeing
the switch go, and you're like, kind of like, give me the ball, like, on the switches. You have to be way more demanding than you are. And I said this earlier in the year. I said, for the Wolves to go far, Cat has to be the best player.
Thank you, sir. I totally agree. I did not hear you say that, but I totally agree.
I love Jimmy Butler, but he's not the offensive talent that Cat is. He can do.
Absolutely.
He can do it from inside, outside effectively. I mean, he is a matchup nightmare, and they're not taking advantage of that.
Well, it's because both of you guys come from a foregone era where the offensive game plan was to actually accentuate your talent, to actually accentuate what you did best. Now everybody wants to play in the same style. Like, I did a video called "Was Defense Better in the 90s?" And what I stated basically was that there are certain things that players today do better. Like, for example, they're better long-range shooters today. Back in the late 80s into the early 90s, which to me is the overall best era in the NBA because of the diversity of styles and the understanding that you had to take advantage of your opponent's weaknesses. You had players who could shoot long range. You had players who could shoot mid range. You had players who posted up. You had players who worked from the inside out. You had players who worked from the outside in, like a Reggie Miller. It was more diverse back then. But the players today are in overall better physical shape and condition, and they're better long-range shooters. I had a couple of old heads who got mad at me in the comments, and look, brothers, and I'll probably do a video about this later on in regards to understanding your generation. You can't just say that everything was better back in the 90s, man. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Things get better, certain things get better, certain things get worse. Everything changes with time. There was one brother trying to give me a hard time. Oh, everything's worse today. The music, the this, the that. Well, let me tell you something. Let's all go ask our dads if the music was better in the 60s or in the 90s or in the 70s or in the 90s. And I guarantee you, even though we might have thought that hip hop was better back in the 90s, our dads would say, what is this bullshit you playing? I want to hear Donny Hathaway. I want to hear Stevie Wonder. Point being is this: everybody has their generation. Don't be so recalcitrant in your views. It stops us all from being able to understand the good things that are going on in the moments that we're living. There are great players in the NBA today. Let's respect that. Can it be better? Yes, it can. I think that they have to understand how to utilize their talent a little bit better, especially in the low post. I just don't understand why more teams don't work from the inside out, especially when you don't have great jump shooters, which Minnesota does not have. They don't have great jump shooters. Nothing against Jamal Crawford. But Jamal Crawford is a guy who is pretty much in the NBA right now because there are very few players that can still do what he does, which is break his man off the dribble and get quick points for his team. There are very few players who can do that right now in the way that he does it, so he's viewed as a weapon. But he also has to understand what his role is when he's on the court. When you have a Karl Anthony Towns in the low box and it's a switch, you got to give him the ball. You can't go through your legs 5 times and pull off a mid-range jumper.
So I will say this. First of all, it was his first ever playoff game, so maybe this was the thing that made him learn kind of this is how I have to do. So,
yeah, you can make that excuse. I want to see him be a little bit more aggressive in this game, too, and I want to see them working a little bit more through him in this game, too.
Zach Lowe said something interesting on his podcast. He said he felt like there were a couple design plays for Cat to run out to the perimeter.
Man,
and that is maybe on Tibbs.
If so, that's bad coaching. I mean, that.
Thank you, sir. I've been saying it for a very long time. Sorry, but Thibodeau's overrated. And on offense, he's terrible.
That is very bad coaching because
The thing is,
you're trying to exploit the mismatch, right? That ain't going to cut it. T driving the ball to kick out to Karl Anthony Towns at the 3-point line, you don't want that.
let me ask you this, man. You were a number one option your whole career. I was number one option offensively. You can tell the coach where you want the ball. He can drop a play and you can say, Coach, no, get it to me right here. This is where I can be effective. Mm-hmm. Period. I mean, right? How many times have you done that?
Karl, he has to understand. Tibbs is not taking you out of the game.
Well, yeah.
You have to demand the ball. You are a number one option. We got to play through you.
Absolutely. And that's the same thing that I'm saying. He also needs to stand up to Thibodeau to stop all that nonsensical verbal abuse. There's a time when you have to be chastised, but he's going to have to nip a lot of shit in the bud in the coming years. And once again, Thibodeau will not be the coach that will lead him to optimize his potential because he just doesn't have it. I never understood what the clamor was for Thibodeau when he got fired by the Chicago Bulls. And everybody was talking about, oh, why is Thibodeau out of work? Clearly, he was out of work because he was interviewing very poorly. He seems to be someone who's still stuck in the early 90s. Tom Thibodeau does.
You got to take us there. If they're going to switch, that's what we want.
All right, so this was a close game in game one, and you guys are saying, oh, they didn't do this, they didn't do this, they could have done this better. Do you think the Wolves can take game two against the Rockets, the number one seed?
You got to say like this. James Harden played as well as he could play, and they still barely won the game. Chris Paul seemed to have an implosion throughout the game, but especially near the end of the game. As we all know, Mike D'Antoni, he hasn't the foggiest idea what to do in close game situations. They may have a chance in game two. We'll see.
They're too young and experienced. Wiggins, he needs to play better. Towns has to play.
That's just a dumb shot right there. And that's what I'm talking about from Jimmy Butler. They have a lot of nice players. They have nice to good players. Jimmy Butler at his best when he's fully healthy is very good. But they have a very strange mix. And just looking at their roster, they have to work more through Karl Anthony Towns.
To play better, but it's all cause and effect because say they do play better, then maybe.
And Thibodeau be looking like he's constipated. Just please end the game. I have to get to the bathroom.
Maybe Jimmy Butler doesn't play as well, or T doesn't play. I think the Rockets are just too good. They're too well coached. They have the MVP, and they're one of the smartest teams in the league.
I wish we had this play. I was watching the game. Mm-hmm. James Harden was coming down at the top of it. Was in the second half. He's coming down the top of the key. Wiggins is running right next to him. Teague is at the free throw line. They ran right by James. James just stopped, pulled back, and looked. He was wide open. They scared James. Yeah, he has fear in there. They are scared of James. And
that's scary season.
Listen, I mean, if you're going to be scared to guard this guy,
you can't play him and play.
Yeah, then just go home. Like, what's the point of you being out there if everybody's scared to get embarrassed? Oh, I don't want to be put in the blender. You know what? Fuck it. Put me in the blender.
Play him in the playoffs.
No,
yeah.
You can't play him. You would not win. Yeah. I looked at that play. I say, they scared of this dude.
By the way, you're like Karl Anthony Towns. If you want a play and you want the guys to cut it, the video of it, you just have to ask for it. That's how that works.
That's it.
Hey, I guess Rachel told you.
Yeah, simple.
My fault,
Don't
guys.
blame. Don't blame.
I'm not pointing the finger.
Remember who you are, Cat. That's all you got to do.
Man the ball.
Remember
I agree, Paul Pierce. You just have to look into the right camera, brother.
who you are.
All right, it's time to bring back one of our favorites.
But anyway, that's it on that. We'll see what happens with Mr. Karl Anthony Towns. They're not going to win this series. At least I doubt they will, unless there's some type of catastrophic injury for the Houston Rockets. I doubt they're going to win this series. They may not even win a game. Either way, Karl Anthony Towns is going to have to assume his rightful place as the leader of that team, just for future reference. But anyway, peace.